Hello, my name is Tatiana Rodionova. I'm Associate Professor of International Economics at the National Mechnikov University in Ukraine. And I'm going to make a presentation about the Ukrainian crisis and its aftermath. So, the presentation outline is the following. We're going to look at the timeline of socioeconomic development of independent Ukraine and the factors which led to the Ukrainian crisis. We'll then look at the reforms progress which were undertaken after the Ukrainian crisis and the key problems which still exist in Ukraine, which need to be resolved. So the timeline of independent Ukraine, I would like to divide into two periods. The first one, after the Ukraine declared independence from the Soviet Union in 1991, till 2018, the period of government formed by representatives of big capital, monopolists and oligarchs. And since May 2019 till present, the period of government of the people's president and parliament. And I'll explain later a bit in detail why I divide this two periods. So let's look briefly how, after the independence of Ukraine in 1991 was proclaimed, how the elections which took place in Ukraine showed that there is a clear division of the country into East and West, depending on how citizens were voting in those elections. So in 1994, presidential election showed that 80% of the population of Southeast Ukraine voted for Kuchma, and the majority of the center and west, 75%, voted for Kravchuk. In 2004, Orange Revolution elections, Yushchenko gained 80% of center and west, and 75% of the population of Southeast Ukraine voted for Yanukovych. The elections in 2010, the presidential elections, 80% of the population of East-South Ukraine voted for Yanukovych, and 75% of the center and west Ukraine voted for Tymoshenko. So we clearly see the lack of cohesion between west and east of the country until the 2019 election, actually, when the whole country united and supported a candidate who was not representing a previous political system and whose central place in his presidential campaign, of Zelensky campaign, was fighting against corruption. But let's see in detail how the Ukrainian crisis happened and which factors were behind it. So the geopolitical factors, first of all, the relations of Ukraine with European Union versus Russian Federation. Several years before the crisis, the negotiations between EU and Ukraine on the formation of free trade area and association membership were taking place. So Ukrainian government has chosen European vector of development rather than Russian. And as Russia traditionally saw Ukraine as their satellite state and wanted them to follow their direction and vision, they wanted Ukraine to be dependent on them economically. So European Union vector of development, which Ukraine chose, would undermine that. Also, it's worth looking at the ethno-linguistic map of Ukraine. Eastern Ukraine has a majority of Russian-speaking population. And many of these people feel an attachment to Russia. And one important fact is that religion is of the Eastern Ukraine is Russian Orthodox, which leads to another reason for attachment to Russia. And when the Ukrainian government took the steps to make the Ukrainian language only official national language, it was viewed as discrimination by many Russian-speaking people. Also, the question of Crimea, historically used to be the part of Russia before it was arbitrarily transferred the jurisdiction over the region to Ukraine in 1954. So what happened in the end of 2013 and beginning of 2014? In November 2013, President Yanukovych cabinet abandoned an agreement to closer ties with the European Union, and instead they started seeking closer cooperation with Russia. This caused small protests. Then, in December 2013, Russian President Putin threw President Yanukovych an economic offer, agreeing to buy $15 billion of Ukrainian debt and reduce the price of Russian gas supplies by a third. This resulted in bigger protests from the population. In 2014, in February, there was a worst day of violence in Kiev. 88 protesters were dead in 48 hours. So the parliament voted to remove the president from power and announced new elections. Yanukovych fled the country. Also, parliament voted to ban Russian as the second official language, causing a wave of anger in Russian-speaking regions. In March 2014, Putin signs a bill to absorb the Crimean Peninsula into Russia. In a referendum which was held in predominantly Russian region in Crimea, 97% of voters backed splitting from Ukraine. And it was all in the presence of Russian troops, this referendum organized. So in May 2014, Poroshenko becomes president in Ukraine. He won presidential election in the first round with 56% of votes. His tenure began amid widespread public hopes and expectations generated by the Euromaidan revolution of 2014 that the Ukrainian government could finally combat the corruption that had torn the country apart since it gained independence in 1991. After becoming a president, Poroshenko started off generally adhering to the provisional government course. He appointed an all-star financial team to run the national bank, tasking it with cleaning the banking system. He also brought quite a technocratic cabinet. Amid this, the EU-Ukraine relations developed, and the association agreement was coming into force in the meantime. So in March 2014, the political provisions of the association agreement were signed. In June 2014, the economic part of the EU-Ukraine Association Agreement was signed. And since 2015, European Union started applying the deep and comprehensive free trade area with Ukraine. In January 2016, Ukraine started applying the deep and comprehensive free trade area with the European Union. However, in April, Dutch-Ukraine European Union Association Agreement referendum was held, and 61% of votes were against the Approval Act. In December 2016, a decision of the heads of states of the European Union proclaimed that the agreement did not commit the EU to grant Ukraine EU membership candidate status, provide security guarantees, military or financial aid, or free movement within the EU. So in the end, Dutch government introduced a bill to confirm approval of the agreement in 2017. In June 2017, EU visa-free travel for Ukraine came into force. And in September 2017, the association agreement entered into force. Let's look how it's interesting to look how the funding of the international organizations such as IMF or European Bank of Reconstruction and Development or the European Union per capita in Ukraine was provided, comparing with other European states. So Ukraine is only approaching Slovakia level of financing. However, Slovakia has not experienced such stress factors as Ukraine did. Let's look at the transition period from 2014 till 2019. Which reforms were undertaken and how successful they were. First of all, the external factors shaping the transition in 2014 and 19 are the following. The transition was happening amid information war and hybrid war, which was conducted by the Russian Federation. Trade and economic aggression of Russia resulted in that revenues from exports reduced by $1 billion annually. Russian occupation of Crimea and areas of Donetsk and Lugansk regions resulted in that industrial production dropped 20% and about $200 million monthly spent providing utilities to the occupied territories. GDP dropped by almost 20% due to war and annexation of Crimea. The military aggression by the Russian Federation resulted that the Ukrainian budget reached 5% of GDP, the military budget, in 2019, which is 10 times more than in 2014. In the meantime, the price drop for key Ukrainian exports. Exports revenue fell by almost 30% in 2019 relative to 2012. Energy aggression by the Russian Federation resulted in the damage from loss of energy facilities in Crimea, and it's estimated as $100 billion. Internal factors shaping this transition in these 5 years are the following. Inefficient law enforcement and judicial systems, exhausted financial and banking system. From 2014 to 2019, more than 100 banks, almost 60% of the total number of banks at the beginning of 2014 went bankrupt. Foreign investments decreased substantially. Foreign direct investment stocks in Ukraine from 2013 till the end of 2018 decreased by more than $20 billion. So it's more than 33% contraction comparing with 2013. Apart from the financial system problem, there was political and government changes, which on average governments changed every 2 years. The Ukrainian army was not prepared for modern hybrid war. and amid ineffective system of the state government and terrorist attacks and sabotage activities on the territory of Ukraine, the development in this period was substantially complicated. Assessing reforms progress allows to give high efficiency of reforms in the following steps: in external debt restructuring, in strengthening defense, police reform was introduced, in optimization of procurement system, in improving the regulatory environment, and improvements in banking sector, promoting Ukrainian interests abroad, diplomacy success. As for the average efficiency of reforms, we would locate here optimization of budget indicators, tax reform, energy sector reform, anti-corruption, public administration reform, geodiversification of exports. And low efficiency is observed in improvement of the investment climate, in pension reform, in revival of credit activity in the economy, and in product export diversification. So in separate fields, let's see how the reforms were progressing. With the European integration, in 2017, finally, the association agreement was ratified by 28 member states. Ukraine met all EU requirements for visa liberalization, and Ukraine launched biometric passports for international travel of Ukrainian citizens. As for deregulation, Ukraine went up from 112th position in 2013 to 76th position in 2018 in doing business rating. More than 15,000 Soviet standards were abolished. About 100 administrative barriers for business was cancelled. So quantity of permits cut from 140 to 84. List of activities that are subject to licensing decreased from 56 to 30. Electronic licensing was introduced. As for reforms tackling anti-corruption, the law on government cleansing lustration was adopted and signed. In October 2014, key anti-corruption laws on new anti-corruption institutions were adopted. National Anti-Corruption Bureau was formed and started investigation. Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office and National Anti-Corruption Policy Council were established. State Bureau of Investigation and National Agency for Identification, Tracing and Management of Assets derived from corruption and other crimes were legislatively established. Property registers became publicly accessible. As for reforms in law enforcement, Police Patrol Service has been created. Prosecutor's Office was deprived of powers of general supervision, and the new law on the Prosecutor's Office adopted. The number of local prosecutors' offices reduced by 23% and administrative staff by 75%. The State Independent Bureau of Investigation has been created. As for judicial reform, amendments to the Constitution regarding the administration of justice and the implementing of law on judiciary and status of judges were adopted. New rules introduced: evaluation of the performance of judges, qualification of examinations, new professional and ethical requirements. As for the reforms in energy sector, foundational law on the natural gas market was adopted. The legal basis for the new European open and competitive gas market was established. There was a significant diversification of gas supply sources. The volume of gas imports from EU increased from 8% in 2013 to 100% in 2018, and Russian share reduced from 92% in 2013 to 0% in 2018. Agreement with alternative suppliers of fuel for nuclear power plants was signed. Deficit of the Naftogaz of Ukraine decreased from $8 billion to $1.5 billion in 2015. Moreover, in 2018, its profit was around $500 million. Utility rates have been adjusted to the market level. As for decentralization, the voluntary merger process was initiated in more than 6,000 territorial communities, and they obtained additional financial resources as a result of financial decentralization. Local government revenues increased. Public procurement was significantly improved. Online system Prozora was created. It helped in saving government budget of around 10%. Prozora received World Procurement Award in 2016. As for progress of reforms in public administration, new law on civil service was adopted. It clearly differentiates political and administrative roles in public service. Quantity in public servants was reduced by 16%. There was a date in state portal for administrative service launched, and Ukraine's public sector efficiency indicator in Global Competitive Index survey increased from 140th position in 2013 to 72nd in 2019. And as regarding the state-owned enterprises governance reforms, for the first time, financial statements of almost 800 state-owned enterprises have been published. More than almost 350 state-owned enterprises were approved for privatization. For the first time, international audit companies audited 150 major state-owned enterprises. And for the first time, reports in the top 100 state-owned enterprises have been published. Market-level compensation for the CEOs of state-owned enterprises has been introduced. As for the management of public finance, since 2014, the quantity of taxes and fees was cut from 22 to 11. Electronic value-added tax administration system was introduced. Employers' social payroll tax rate has been reduced from 41% on average in 2014 to 22% in 2018. Experiment on financing road construction and development from the surplus of custom duties has started. Ukrainian foreign debt of more than $19 billion was restructured. Ministry of Finance launched e-data portal for monitoring public finance. As for financial sector, more than 100 insolvent banks were closed during 2014 and 2019. Budget deficit reduced from more than 11% in 2014 to 2.5% in 2018. Macroeconomic situation in the country stabilized. As for the e-government and innovation, 3G was introduced in 2015 and the budget gained almost 11 billion Ukrainian hryvnias via transparent tender. Open data portal was launched. Electronic petitions to the President of Ukraine launched. More than 21,000 petitions are registered to date. Other electronic services have been introduced, including electronic apostille and access to public registers in the Ministry of Justice. So why, after all these reforms, there's still Ukraine experiencing problems? I would like to highlight three key problems of the country, which are curse of natural resources, oligarchs, and corruption. And now let's talk a bit about it more in detail. The curse of natural resources. What's with that? The problem of the Ukrainian development in 1991, since its independence till 2018, is the natural wealth of Ukraine, which led to the problem of the curse of natural resources and high level of corruption. What is the curse of natural resources? When countries with great natural resource wealth tend to grow more slowly than resource-poor countries, and much slower if the high level of corruption exists in the country. Because in this case, ruling elite advocates the preservation of the monopoly structures in the economy and is strictly against competition in foreign investments. Example, Azerbaijan and Norway. In Norway, income per capita is $75,000 a year, and in Azerbaijan, only $4,000. Although in terms of natural resource wealth, they are similar. The high level of corruption causes such low growth rates for Azerbaijan. So Ukraine belongs to the leading mineral raw countries of the world with a wide range of minerals. It has about 5% of the world's mineral resources. And Ukraine has about 71% of the surface which is used for agricultural activity. About 80% of the agricultural area is arable land, and 2/3 of it the agriculturally rich black soil. So Ukraine has 25% of the planet's black soil, which is the great number, which provides great number of crops and considers the best land for agriculture. And 2/3 of the Ukrainian exports are products with a low degree of processing. Looking at the structure of the economy, it can be stated that it's a raw material structure. If we look at the changes from 2012 to 2018, we can see that nothing changed. Metal products are still around 27% of the Ukrainian exports. Agriculture exports even grew from 24% to 42%. Mineral raw materials and fuel around 10%. Machinery production and vehicles, exports mainly to Russia, Kazakhstan, and Belarus, dropped from almost 20% to 7% in 2018. So the problem of oligarchs in Ukraine. As a result of extensive development of basic Ukrainian industries while a part of Soviet Union, Ukraine inherited a large industrial potential when Soviet Union collapsed. The major industries were power generation, fuels, chemicals, gas, and food production. Most Ukrainian industrial enterprises were located in southeast part of the country. And in the 90s, several people got these businesses for free. 90% of the exporting enterprises are controlled by Ukrainian oligarchs through companies with offshore jurisdiction. And until 2019, all of the political parties in the parliament, as well as 10 of the most viewed channels, were controlled by oligarchs. Who are oligarchs? They are usually defined as businessmen having direct influence on both politics and economy. In 2008, the combined wealth of Ukraine's 50 richest people was equal to 85% of Ukraine's GDP. In November 2013, before the Ukraine's Revolution of Dignity or Euromaidan, this number was 45% GDP. Rinat Akhmetov, born in 1966, is ranked among the wealthiest men in Ukraine. In 2015, he was listed as the 216th richest man in the world with an estimated net worth of $6.5 billion. So what is the consequence of corruption in agricultural sector of Ukraine? In Ukraine, agricultural land is owned by individuals, and 80% of them are retired, and the land is leased to agricultural companies, usually on a 5 or 7 year basis, in some cases up to 50 years. It is forbidden to sell or buy any of the agricultural land in Ukraine. The average rent price of agricultural land in Ukraine is 43 euro per hectare per year. In some regions, 25 euros. In comparison, in Poland, it's around 220 euro. After the Revolution of Dignity and military conflict in the east of Ukraine, the main income of Ukrainian oligarchs shifted from the resource-based industries to the Ukrainian agriculture. Due to the moratorium on the land market, foreign investors can't create competition to the Ukrainian oligarchs. Ukraine has seen decline of FDI assets from 2013, $67 billion, to 2018, only $45 billion. If we compare price of agricultural land, in Germany it's more than 30,000 euros. In Netherlands, 60,000 euros. Switzerland, 70. Spain, 16. Romania, 6. And Ukraine, through illegal operations, only 500 euros. As for the consequences of corruption for Ukrainian banking system, as of 2018, deposit rate in the banks was at the level of 11–18%, while main refinancing rate was 18%, the highest in Europe. One-year government bond yield was 21%. Loan rate for business and population from 24%. Share of fully state-owned banks more than 60%. Share of bad debts in state bank 60%. In private banks only 25%. And amid this, there was an increase in the net profit of International Investment Bank, which in 2017, the owner of 60 shares in this bank was the former Ukrainian president, Poroshenko. Almost 250% profit was shown. So in 2019, new era started for Ukraine after the election of the new president, Vladimir Zelensky. He was supported by the majority of Ukrainian citizens. They united to elect a president who was not representing the previous political system, who was proclaiming that fighting corruption is his main priority. In April 2019, people chose him as president of Ukraine. He used to be a showman and has never worked in the public administration system before. So he was aiming to fight corruption and the oligarchic structure in the economy. In July 2019, his political party, Servant of the People, received an absolute majority of seats in the Ukrainian parliament. In August 2019, the youngest government in Europe with an average minister's age of 39 years was formed. The discount rate of the National Bank decreased from 18 to 6%. Loans under 5% became available for business. A ceasefire has been introduced in the east of Ukraine. So this can be named as positive changes after the presidency of Zelensky for the economy of Ukraine. However, starting 2020, in the beginning of March 2020, President Zelensky, under pressure from oligarchs, dismissed the young and promising government. And the former top manager of the oligarch Metals company became the prime minister of the country. Parliament of Ukraine completely banned companies with foreign investments from taking part in transactions on the land market. Constitutional Court of Ukraine overturned the main provisions of anti-corruption legislation. So these developments undermine previous achievements of Zelensky governance and puts question mark whether the next development could bring so longly expected changes for Ukraine. Thank you for your attention. I'm open for your questions. Please let me know if you have any by my email address. Thank you.